I guess we can start.
Yeah, sure.
A very warm welcome to everyone in this meeting. Today, we have been joined by one of the brightest minds of this generation, whose dream and perseverance has now made it possible for anyone to learn to code. It is with the greatest pleasure that I welcome Mr. Quincy Larson to this event. He founded Free Code Camp in 2014, and since then, he has strived to make coding related resources free and available on the internet. It's a greatest honor to have you here with us today, sir. Moderating this session in parallel is Ms. Joyce Maria Joseph, presently a teaching assistant in IIT Guwahati and former secretary of IEEE Women in Engineering Affinity Group, College of Engineering, Chenganu, in the year 2018. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule and helping us with this session. Once again, I welcome you all, and now it's time for us to move forward with our session. Handing over to you, Miss Joyce. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Krishna. Thank you. So, good morning, guys who are all in India. So, my name is Joyce Maria Joseph, and I'm currently pursuing Masters in Computer Science at IIT Guwahati. And I had been an alumni of IEEE Student Branch College of Engineering, Chenganu. And I feel extremely privileged today to be moderating this fireside chat with the one and only Mr. Quincy Larson. So, Quincy is the founder of Free Code Camp, and Free Code Camp is one of the world's largest online web development learning platform, which is like free of cost, and which has already given away lots of certifications and dream jobs for millions of people out there. So it's actually really an amazing job you are doing there, Quincy. So welcome to this fireside chat, and really happy to have you here with us today.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Joyce and Krishna. I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. So, first question, like it's not like a question. We would like to hear your story, your journey. Like you had been a teacher and you have been a director of a school and then a software engineer, then all the way to founder of such an amazing venture like Free Code Camp. Can you just give us a brief, like how was the journey and what motivated you to come into this new path?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, first of all, thanks everybody for making time to listen to my humble story. It's not that exciting, but I was living in California. I'd been working as a school director in both in China and in the United States, and I was living in California, and I was just running the school, and it was not the most efficient school. I imagine you all can relate, but perhaps you've been in a school where it seems like there's a lot of paperwork and perhaps the teachers don't have as much time to spend with you as they would like to, because they have to go and do paperwork and things like that. And so I was the director of the school, and I was like, how can we make it more efficient? How can we make it so that the teachers can spend more time with the students? And I didn't know very much about technology. Like I was afraid of technology to some extent. I was the kind of person who, like, whenever we moved, I would actually have my wife set up the Wi-Fi router because I would get frustrated and I just feel like, I can't figure out how to configure this. And then she'd be like, oh, well, let me do it. And I'll be like, okay, great. I can go do something else and not be frustrated. So that I was 30 years old, approximately, maybe 31. And I was running the school and I just wanted to make it more efficient. And so I just Googled around and learned some basic software skills. Very basic stuff, like how to automate clicking around on different websites and filling out government forms, and how to automate Excel spreadsheets and filling out grade reports and attendance reports and things like that. So, but I was able to take a whole lot of this paperwork and, general work that the teachers and the administrators had to do and do it automatically so that the teachers could just spend more time with the students. And as a result, it was a huge improvement, and like everybody was happy, and like everybody was like, oh, I want to get my friends to transfer in here. Soon the school was like very prosperous just because of a little bit of time and energy that I put into learning some very basic programming. And so I decided, wow, this is amazing. Like, what if I learned to actually code properly? So I left that job and I just studied very hard independently. I used, online courseware, and I read lots of books. and I was able to learn how to code well enough. And I entered in lots of hackathons, which I think many of you have probably done a hackathon. But I did a hackathon every single weekend. I would drive all around California, or I would ride the bus or the train up and down the state, and I would just go to as many hackathons as I could. And eventually I started winning them. Even though I was the 30-year-old guy, I was obviously older than everybody else, because most of the people were like just finished university, or were, you know, still relatively early in their careers. So it was interesting, but I was able to get a job as a software engineer after about 7 months of self-study. And that's when the real learning began, when I was working, and I started to learn even more. And then eventually I decided I want to build some resources to help people learn to code so that they can potentially take their school or, you know, their institution, whatever organization they're in, and make it more efficient. So I started creating learning resources for programming and technology. And after about 2 years of creating resources that nobody cared about, I eventually created Free Code Camp, and people did start to care about that. So then the community just kind of grew, and yeah, it happened very quickly from that point on. But there were many years of experimenting and ambiguity and self-doubt, not knowing whether I could learn to code, whether I was, you know, but the answer is yes, I was able to learn to code. And I think that pretty much anybody who wants to learn to code, who is sufficiently motivated, can learn to code. It's just a question of putting in a whole lot of time and practice.
Yeah, sure, sure. Yeah, I see a lot of enthusiasm, and you are really an inspiration for us now. Okay. So, moving on to the next question, I do have a set of questions which are curated from all of the students who are participating today. So, the next one would be like, what are your thoughts on offline versus online learning? Like, you had both experience, right? You had been a teacher and you are the founder of some really cool organization. So, which one do you think would students mostly benefit from, offline or online?
Yeah, well, there's a role for both of them. And, you know, a lot of my inspiration around Free Code Camp was just seeing what Khan Academy was doing, which is also, like, I would argue, you know, just as inspirational, if not more inspirational, what they've done. And they're focused on kids, of course. Free Code Camp's focused on adult learners, and
Yeah.
almost all my teaching experiences with adults. So it's taking, you know, people that are midway through their career and helping them learn new skills. And before I started learning the program, I was running English schools. So it was taking like people in their 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s and teaching them English well enough that they could get a job at like a multinational, for example. Like a lot of people from Brazil, a lot of people from China, Saudi Arabia, places like that, helping them learn. So I already had kind of experience with helping older people learn those technologies. And being in person is so powerful, because there's a part of your brain that, like, you have to remember, like, humans evolved on a savanna and everything was like contextual, like, okay, where's the predator in relation to me? Where are my tribesmen in relation to me? You know, where's the food? You know, all these different things, like where. And so a huge part of our brain is just dedicated to memorizing. Like, I'd be willing to bet that you remember like exactly where you were the first time you learned certain facts. Like it's almost part of the memory. Like, oh yeah, I remember when I learned that because I was sitting next to my friend at the cafe and he showed me this really cool tool or something like that, right? So that's just part of being a human. And I think part of being a teacher is like idealized, like, hey, we're in the Matrix. I need to fly a helicopter, you know, like give me the helicopter training. Okay, I can fly a helicopter. Like that's what we want education to eventually look like, but it's going to be so hard to recreate that. Because so much of our brain is rooted in people drawing in sand on the ground, like explaining, like, if you encounter this animal, this is what you need to do, you know, things like that. So in person is probably going to be, you know, like even if you watch like Star Trek and stuff like that, like there's still an in-person academy that people go to. And granted, a lot of that was created before they understood the extent of like the possibility of virtual reality and things like that. I still think that it's in-person education is going to play an important role. Where online education wins is it's very convenient and it can be essentially infinitely reproduced with zero increase in marginal cost.
Yeah.
So because it's infinitely reproducible and because you can rewind that Khan Academy video and rewatch it as many times as you want, and Salman Khan could be sleeping, he doesn't care. That's the power of online learning, is for a lot of the kind of like drill type learning, but a lot of the experiential learning, you do benefit from going to a hackathon or hanging out at a hackerspace or going to a classroom and going to see a great lecture in a lecture hall.
Like more of getting your hands dirty in your practice, that makes the most of it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So the next question is a bit interesting. The students have asked, like, is coding a bit overrated these days because it's getting advertised a lot? And do you think that it is a really essential skill, or it's necessary for striving in this today's world? Without coding, can a person survive?
Yeah, I mean, you could just clean people's houses, or go and gather trash or something. Like, these are jobs that will probably continue to exist, right? It's not like we're going to completely automate away like all office work, for example, or building houses, right? Like, I don't imagine there are going to be robots that are just building up all the houses and everything. There's still going to be construction work. There's still going to be lots of types of work.
Yeah, maybe
A lot
boats
of
can help with that. Boats can
Yeah,
help with that too.
yeah. I mean, I think that a lot of people are overly um, enthusiastic about what robots and artificial intelligence technology can
Yeah.
actually accomplish. Um, we'll see. But I think that, like, when I talk about coding, a lot of people think like, oh, like writing, web apps or programming deep learning models, like they have these specific types of coding in mind. But in many ways, programming is just, I define coding and programming, which I use the two words synonymously, as just getting some machine to do what you want it to do. Whether that is, programming your Google Calendar to, like, notify you when certain events come up, or figuring out some sort of system through which you can be more productive and get things done. So it doesn't necessarily mean like going in and writing JavaScript code, although that is a big part of it, is being able to actually do like the high level implementation details.
Yeah.
JavaScript and Python are abstractions that sit on top of like lower level, they're written in like C, and then even lower than that, assembly, and like even lower than that, just the actual machine moving bits around in memory and stuff, right? So if you think about it, like, it's not a far-fetched thing for us to imagine like computer cross-reference the number of ships that have been through here with like the amount of volume of this space, something like that. Like you imagine like on Star Trek when they tell the computer what to do. I mean, that's programming, right?
Yeah.
And if you watch a lot of episodes like the newer, like the Next Generation and like Voyager and stuff like that, I don't know how popular it is. Does anybody here watch Star Trek? Has anybody watched it? I know it's an American show, so you might have like better, Bollywood equivalents. But if you're familiar with it, you'll know like all the characters program. Like, that's a big part of the show, is like figuring out like program engineering solutions to different problems that crop up. So yeah, I think people are going to be programming for a long time, but I don't think it's just like learning advanced math. Like, you can make it very far in life without learning calculus. You can make it very far in life without learning statistics. But if you learn it, it's extremely helpful, and it opens up a whole lot of potential opportunities.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. But at least, like, nowadays, since it has become a great trend, like I've seen many people going into coding and web development. Even if it's not interesting to them, they do it because it's the current trend, and then just fail up or be really in a bad condition due to that. So what do you think about that? And what do you think like free code camp can do to tackle this issue?
Well, I wouldn't ever consider it a problem that people are curious and want to learn, even whatever the reason. A lot of people want to go into medicine to get rich, not just to help people with their health. And I think
Yeah.
that's fine. If the outcome is we have more doctors and those doctors are better capable, then that's great. It doesn't really matter to some extent what the incentive is. Like, I mean, you could say the same thing for people that are building houses. Like, maybe they just want to provide for their family, or maybe they genuinely wake up like, I'm going to provide shelter for this family today. Whatever the motivation, the net result is, more people are able to do this. And if more people are able to code and software improves and everything gets more efficient, I mean, like a lot of the major world problems that we're facing, climate change, a lot of problems with like food security, things like that, those are problems of management. And a
Yeah.
lot of the management is done by computers. Humans program the computers, and the computers oversee these systems. Misinformation. A lot of that is because the algorithms are not good enough at recommending good information to people, so they're getting radicalized on YouTube or Facebook or whatever, right?
Yeah.
I think having more people that know how to program, regardless of why they became programmers, is probably a good thing. Just like having more people that are able to read and write is probably good, and having more people that are able to do math is probably good.
Yeah, true, true. And now I'm like really happy to announce that I'm one of your subscriber in your YouTube channel. And I must say that the quality of the content you provide is really, really awesome. Like, have you ever thought like there are companies out there who sells these courses for cost? Like, how can you do that free of cost? And what's your motive behind that?
Yeah. First of all, I don't think there's anything wrong with selling things. Like I wouldn't fault any of these course providers for it costs money to create the courses. Free
Yeah.
Code Camp happens to be in a position where because we have donors, we're able to it's just a different way of paying for things, right? Like
Mm.
in my opinion, running a NGO where everybody donates, or not everybody, but like we only have about 7,000 people who donate each month, but that adds up to be quite a bit of money if everybody's donating $5 US. Um, and it's mostly Americans. I mean, like 60+% of the donations come from America, which we're an American NGO. America is also the wealthiest country, like at least in total wealth.
Yeah.
It's very unequal, which you may be learning more watching like the news from the US and realizing, oh, wow, there are a lot of poor people in the US. Yes.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of obscenely rich people in the US too, right? It's extremely unequal. It's about as unequal as like Brazil or Russia or someplace like that, right? But the good thing is that there are people who are able to support us, and then we apply for grants. Like we got a grant from Google to create a TensorFlow course, for example, and so we're getting grants from different organizations and creating courses around that. So a lot of times we're able to produce those courses. And another thing is, Free Code Camp is we're very efficient. We don't have like a lot of the corporate overhead that like a startup even would have. There are only 12 people that work Free Code Camp full time, and we have a few other people who work like part time. They'll just do various like they'll create courses here and there, or they'll create articles and tutorials here and there. But for the most part, it's just a few core people, and we don't have an office. We're all remote. So we have somebody who's in Bengaluru, right? Mukesh, who does all our DevOps. We have people in Turkey. We have people in China. People in most of us are here in the U.S. But because we're all online and we just get on at whatever time, we figure out systems to be more efficient so that we can just drive down the price. And our total annual budget for 2020 was less than $500,000 US.
Oh.
But we were able to deliver 1.3 billion minutes of usage, which is the equivalent of 2,500 years worth of. So the best way to think of it is at any given point in 2020, there were 2,500 people using Free Code Camp and learning.
That's
And we
huge.
were able to achieve that for like a tiny fraction. Just to give you, like, since I mentioned Khan Academy earlier, their budget's about 200 times ours. So just being extremely efficient. But I understand and I appreciate that a lot of organizations are not that efficient. And I also understand that there's like a profit motive. If you have a bunch of investors, they're going to want you to be able to generate a return. Like people invest money hoping to get more money back, right? So they might expect like a 10x return, depending on whether it's a seed stage or a Series A or Series B investment. So again, I don't fault anybody for charging for those things. For Free Code Camp, though, when I created Free Code Camp, I put the word "free" right at the beginning. It's
Yeah,
very important to me.
it does make the meaning really, really cool. That's like most of the time the people are just concerned about the business perspective and not about how you can serve the people back, or you can give back to the society or do something good for them. So in that level you are doing a really great job. Then the next thing is like there were many criticisms about how coding boot camps were an ineffective way to go about teaching programming and computer science fundamentals, as the knowledge that you get from there is like more of a kind of a quick fix rather than a substantial one. So what's your thought on that?
Well, I think that it takes years to learn how to code properly, and I always tell people, like, if you're getting like a CS degree, don't drop out of your CS program to study free code camp. Like, you can learn free code camp on the side while you're going through your school. Or free code camp is designed to make it life easier for CS students.
Yeah.
But it's also designed for people who, like me, I studied English, and I was already 30 years old when I started learning the code, and I had to just kind of cobble together a bunch of different resources, like, oh, MIT OpenCourseWare, oh, this textbook from 5 years ago, things like that. And it was a very confusing and ambiguous process. Free Code Camp wants to simplify that so that, like, if you're a 30-something, maybe you already have children, you have a full-time job, you've got all these other responsibilities. If you can carve out like 20 or 30 minutes a day to just sit down and code for a little bit, over the course of several years, you can get pretty good at programming and you may be able to become a developer. So I personally, I don't like the idea of coding boot camps. Like, I don't like the idea of trying to jam everything into a short period of time. I think the way that the human brain learns, you can only learn so much every day, and there's rapidly diminishing returns. So if you think about it, like, if you were to just play piano for like 30 minutes a day for like 2 or 3 years, that would be way better for you in terms of improving with your piano than if you just said, I'm just going to play piano all day, every day for like 12 weeks or something like that, right? Like why do we think coding is any different from like playing piano, right? I mean, obviously it's better to just practice a little bit every day for a long period of time. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So the real question is, why do coding boot camps exist? Like, why did it occur to people like, oh, we should just teach them everything really fast? Well, it kind of comes back to economics. I think a lot of people, like, time is money, and if you're changing careers, a lot of people would think, well, I don't have years to learn how to code. I don't have a job. I need to get a new job now, or I really hate working on Wall Street. I really want to work in Silicon Valley instead. People want to do it, and whenever people want to do it, there will be some marketer who's like, sure, we'll do that for you. It's ill-advised, but if you give me like tons of money, I can figure out a way to make it happen, right? So I think to some extent, the better approach, and again, I do know people who've gone through boot camps and have been able to get a job and everything, and a lot of people who use free code camp also use it in conjunction with the boot camp, or a lot of boot camps use free code camp as a big part of their curriculum, which is fine. We don't have any commercial restrictions. We're Creative Commons licensed. We're BSD3 licensed. So everything's open source and available for schools to use. But I definitely think it's better to set expectations that it is going to take years. And then what I tell people is, don't quit your job. Don't drop out of school. Just keep doing what you're doing and just learn a little at a time and plan very far ahead.
Yeah.
Planning is everything.
Cool. So, like, nowadays in this era, like, everything is ready-made, right? You can find a solution to any problem in the internet, and then people are writing less code and more of like moving into ready-made stuff. Like, how can you try to basically motivate young minds to learn something on their own and to explore something new out there?
Yeah, well, first of all, that notion, it's all been done. Every kind of cereal has been tried. Every kind of music has been tried. Like, I can understand that sentiment, but that's not a really constructive way to look at things. I mean, the reality is there are 7 billion people on Earth. You're not that unique. Like, even if you're one in a million, there are 7,000 people who are just like you, right?
Yeah.
So, like, it's not really helpful to think in terms of it's all been done. The reality is, like, why was I able to get free code camp going and to create something that didn't really exist before? I mean, you could argue that there were things like free code camp that had existed before, for sure. So how original was it really? It doesn't really matter. That's the thing, is, like, a lot of times people are like, I want to write a blog article, but every blog article has already been written. Like, what could I possibly add about, React.js, or what could I possibly add about Matplotlib or some, some library or something, right? People are like, they lose motivation and they're just like, oh, it's too late. I should have been born, 20 years earlier or something like that. I don't know what people tell themselves, but the reality is there will always be new problems to solve. And it's not about like being the first to do it. It's about doing it the best way for like a certain specific purpose. Like when you're writing an article about a technology, probably there are hundreds of articles about that technology already, but you might write it in a way that like a specific person out there like really connects with and identifies your way of with your way of explaining it. And and that's just blogs. I mean, when you're talking about writing, like everything's a CRUD app. Like, why aren't we just using Ruby on Rails to like build the entire internet? And I mean, to be fair, like a lot of websites do use WordPress still.
Yeah.
It's a huge chunk of the web is. I think it's at least like 30 or 40% of top websites still use WordPress. So you could definitely argue that, but at the same time, even though a whole lot of sites use WordPress, there are plenty of WordPress related jobs maintaining those sites and extending their functionality. So yeah, I mean, my answer to that would just be like, don't get dispirited. Yeah, obviously, when you stand back and you look at it, like, this is absurd. What are we doing? What's the point? But if you think in that term, it's not really constructive. It's better to like put one foot in front of the other. In fact, Linus Torvald, who created Linux, I often like, this isn't like a widely cited quote of his. It's just something I heard him say during an interview one time. He said like, so many people are busy like looking up at the stars, wondering like, oh, we should go there, or what's up there, and I'm just looking down at the ground, trying to make sure I don't fall into some pothole in front of me. And I mean, that's Linus Torvalds, arguably the most prolific software engineer in human history. If you think about the install base of Linux, like all the servers, most of the phones, he is still like looking down to make sure he doesn't trip over something. He's saying, I'm not some great visionary who has all the answers. I'm just doing things one day at a time.
Cool. I think our participants got some really valuable stuff out of that answer. That was really good. Like, how would you suggest a learner to use the resource of your platform and many other online learning platforms such that it provides an optimized learning experience for them? Like, what would you suggest them to do?
Well, I would recommend, if you don't know what to do, just start at the beginning of Free Code Camp and work through the end. We designed everything with that in mind. Like, we designed like, okay, you have no idea what to learn. Like, you could do it the Quincy way, which is to spend a whole bunch of months like doing redundant things or things that won't matter, and wasting a whole lot of time and thrashing. Or you can take this path that thousands of people have contributed to, tens of thousands of people have gone through and gotten developer jobs, at least that we know of. I mean, it could be hundreds of thousands, but at least according to LinkedIn, we're confident that tens of thousands of people have gotten developer jobs after completing Free Code Camp. So it's a proven path. It works. Yes, you can definitely mix it up. You could say like, oh, I really like this, YouTube channel like Syntax, or there are lots of really great creators in the YouTube community, like Anya Kubo, for example, or Coder, people like that, like really good channels where you can supplementarily learn things, or just playing with your friends on like Code Wars or Coding Game, or some of these kind of gaming, like where coding becomes a game or a competition. I don't know if anybody does Leak Code for fun or HackerRank for fun, but some people, those might be fun. They're definitely helpful if you want to improve your skills. But I would say like just choose a single core like curriculum and don't overthink it. I mean, if you already paid for some Udemy course and you're like, well, this seems helpful, I'm just going to finish this. Great, go ahead and finish it. Like, finish what you start would be my main advice. And if you don't know what to do, like Free Code Camp, like, I mean, it sounds like I'm just advertising Free Code Camp and everything, but really we designed it for this purpose, for that use case. So I think it'll be helpful.
Yeah. Actually, Free Code Camp is really good in that sense. Like, can you just explain like how much lengthy or what's the duration of a typical course which you can get in Free Code Camp?
So if you go through the curriculum itself, like the core curriculum, we cover lots of topics like Java and C and even COBOL, and lots of like kind of topics that we don't cover as in depth in the Free Code Camp curriculum yet. Like we have like full courses on algebra and calculus and statistics, and then on different computer science concepts and things like that. But if you look at the core free code camp curriculum, which is like the interactive, you're building projects and you're getting feedback, like you're running your tests and they're failing, and instantaneous feedback. Like that tight feedback loop is very critical to quickly evaluating your knowledge and then, reasserting your knowledge.
Yeah.
And like failing tests over and over until you get those tests to pass and then being able to move on. That's the core gameplay loop. That's the most important thing you can be doing as a learner. That curriculum is about 3,000 hours worth of coding practice.
3,000 hours. Yeah.
Yeah. So it would take you about 2 years. And one of the things that I announced last week, I don't know if anybody in the audience has seen this announcement, but we're actually expanding the curriculum to include a lot of advanced mathematics, machine learning, and data science. So that will essentially double the length of the curriculum. So it'll go from being something that takes about two years of full-time study to being something that takes about 4. But of course, we're not expecting everybody to finish it. Most people don't even finish the current curriculum before they go out and get a job. It's just like, it's there. You can, after you get a job, you can go back and continue to expand your skills.
Yeah, that's really nice. Okay. Like, have you ever thought that free code camp would become just such great learning experience for everyone during the inception of that idea? Like, have you ever thought about it?
Well, I certainly hoped and dreamed and wished, but no. Like, I mean, it's really amazing. And I spent 2 years just building education tools that nobody used. Like, I couldn't even convince my friends to use them. So to go from that, like me being like the crazy 30-something guy who left his perfectly good school director career to like sit in his closet and like, bang his head on his computer all day. Like a lot of people were questioning my sanity. So it is, it feels great. I'm not going to deny it. Like, it feels amazing. But more than anything, it just makes me want to try to like keep helping more people. I feel like I've been given this huge opportunity to be a part of this organization. And one thing I always tell people is like 60% of the people on earth are living off less than $10 a day. Like, they don't have the resources they probably don't even have a credit card to buy a course on like Udemy or something like that. Right. And that's a lot of people. I mean, that's billions of people who would benefit potentially from learning math and computer science and programming that we could potentially help by creating free learning resources. So more than anything, I just feel like a great sense of obligation to take this, essentially luck. I mean, I was very lucky to be born in the United States. I was very lucky to be, middle class, and to be like a native English speaker, like all these different things, right? Like,
Yes.
to grow up in a time when there were opportunities to be able to build things. And I feel like I need to take this luck and this has been a gift to me, and I need to make the most of it, or I'm going to die regretting like not having realized everything I could have realized, And I'm sure a lot of people feel that same way whenever they get like some sort of accomplishment. Maybe they get into a position where they can do a lot of good, and they're like, I feel an obligation to do a lot of good. I know plenty of doctors who think that way, for example. So I don't think that's really any different from other people, but that's kind of how I look at it. Like, every day I wake up and I'm like, all right, how can I further take advantage of this momentum that the universe has given me?
I think you have really found the purpose of your life and you are making the most out of it for the others. That's really great. Like, did you had any motive of becoming a teacher, by the way, to take teaching as a profession?
Yeah, I was living in China, and I had been tutoring kids. Like, that's how I helped pay for like my cost of living during university. Is I would go to like wealthy families and like help tutor their kids and stuff and teach them different topics and things like that. And so I love teaching. And before, I was working as like a newspaper journalist, and I would write lots of articles explaining different topics, like. And that really was a form of teaching. I mean, it's taking like a whole bunch of knowledge and breaking it down in a way that people can more easily understand it. So I feel like it's always been kind of my calling, is to just learn things and then turn around and teach them.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's always been that way, and to this day, like I still consider myself a teacher more than I consider myself a software engineer or like a person who runs an NGO or anything like that. Like teacher is definitely like I think have much more affinity when I meet teachers around the world than I do when I talk to software engineers or founders of projects and things like that.
Yeah, and the children are also lucky to have you as the teacher. Okay. Like moving on, like having tasted success, many non-profit organizations have made their change into a for-profit ones. So do you have any plans in the near future, or do you have you even thought of making Free Code Camp a for-profit organization in any time?
So I don't know what the laws are in India. In the US, it's extremely rare for a nonprofit to convert to. I mean, there is like a legal avenue to do it, but I can't think of any nonprofits that have done that. Even Mozilla, for example, Mozilla is a nonprofit, but they have the Firefox division, which is kind of like a for-profit, but it's a for-profit inside a nonprofit, right? Like
Yeah.
in the US, a nonprofit cannot be bought by anybody. Like nobody owns it. Like Free Code Camp, I don't actually own any equity in it or anything. It's a public, like you own as much of Free Code Camp as I do, Joyce.
Okay.
So as a result of that, the process of like converting over for profit would be really weird. There have been examples of that, but usually what happens is a for-profit becomes nonprofit and gets tax exempt status. And so like Free Code Camp, for example, I just was in a hurry and I just created a California corporation, and it was technically for profit, even though we never sold anything. We sold t-shirts, but they barely covered anything. I actually took like about 150,000 US dollars of my money that me and my wife have been saving to buy a house in California. And that's how we kind of kept Free Code Camp going for the first 3 years. And then when we got our tax exempt status, like we converted to a nonprofit, we got tax exempt status and did all the legal paperwork, and it takes years to do this. And then so we're a donor supported nonprofit. We would like, I don't think we would ever convert to a for-profit. Yeah, it's rare. Again, it's very rare for organizations to do that. Usually it's because the company, it's like completely insolvent and they just need like a corporate entity to absorb it so that it can continue to operate. But Free Code Camp is sustainable and it's break even with the current level of donation. So I don't think that'll ever be an issue. I'm sorry, I know that's kind of a complicated answer, but the answer is no. We're not going to become for profit.
Okay. Cool. I see that your family is really supporting your cause. Like, are you getting enough time to spend for them, like in this busy schedule days?
Yes. So I'm very careful. This is a great question about work-life sustainability. So early on with Free Code Camp, like I was working like crazy hours. I would work like 100 plus hours. I would even like get on Twitch and I just like live stream myself working on the Free Code Camp code base for like, all day and everything. Thankfully, most of that has been deleted by Twitch. Like after a certain number of days, like they just delete the video because I'm sure I had like bags under my eyes and I was probably like, because I mean, I was just working so much. And you could argue maybe I didn't even need to work that hard. Maybe if I just like slept more and I could have worked smarter rather than working so hard. But now I'm definitely like, I'm sleeping 8 hours a day. I'm trying to spend a lot of time with my family. And I think that having a rhythm is really important. So I don't ever take a full day off. Like I haven't actually taken a full day off since I started Free Code Camp. Like even though I've had 2 kids born and stuff, like I'll be at the hospital and like I'll hold the baby. And when the baby goes to sleep, one hand's over on the keyboard, like taking care of work and stuff. And that's not to brag. That's just because I personally like having momentum. I don't like to stop. Go as slowly as you might. It's like going for a marathon, right? Like if you try to run a marathon, the first thing they tell you is never stop and walk. Always run at least, even if you're running really slowly, keep running. Because once you start walking, then it's so hard to start running again.
Yeah.
So I only work about like 4 to 6 hours a day. But if you multiply it out, it's about 40 to 50 hours a week. So it's a very sustainable period of time. I'm not like crazy working like nonstop, and I don't need to take vacations to like decompress or anything because everything's at a sustainable pace, 7 days a week.
Yeah, that's really great. Like in this COVID days, like we also had, or almost all of the Indians were working from home. And then we had issues like we have heard issues of people working late at night, also not even having a word with their family or their children, not getting time for this and that. So, like, do you have any advice for them, like how to finally perfect, like find a perfect work-life balance with your work and your family and everything, like your passion, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I would say like if your job requires you to do it, do it. Like you don't want to blow up your career because you insist like, no, I'm not going to work anymore. Like when I used to work for like, as a school director, and it was part of like this big Japanese corporation. It was like a multinational corporation, like with schools all over the world. And I was just running one of those schools, but like I had to work a lot. And I totally understand like when your boss is like, hey, you need to do this, and you just have to figure out a way to do it, right? Like at least at my job, they didn't track hours. It's just like understood your salary, you're going to work however many hours it takes to get it done. So I can relate to that. I don't want to seem like, oh, I'm just coming from like this San Francisco, like everybody's rich and like, things just, you can do whatever you want. Cause there are a lot of kind of hippie type people in the software engineer field who would like, but what, you work more than 40 hours a week? What's wrong with you? Like the reality is that's a position of extreme privilege to be able to push back on your boss like that. And most people aren't in that position, and I wasn't. So what I recommend to do is just the most important thing I would tell people is get 8 hours of sleep. It doesn't matter like what you're doing. You'll actually work a lot more efficient if you sleep 8 hours. I'm not saying let's sleep 9 hours or more than that. I think if you get 8 hours of sleep, that will make you much more efficient. You'll be able to get work done. And then if you're at a point where you're clearly like kind of going down in terms of productivity, just stop and go to sleep and then wake up and start working again. And that has always served me well. Like the most important thing that defines, I think, learning and to some extent work is this kind of law of diminishing returns. At some point, you're putting more and more time to get like the same amount of productivity, the same amount of work done. So if you're cognizant of that and you're constantly evaluating, like, am I tired? Like, am I even is it worth my time to continue working on this problem? Is this an emergency? If it's an emergency, you just have to keep working. Like if the servers are down, you're not going to go take an 8-hour nap and then come back and say, oh, okay, we had 8 hours of downtime, but I'm well rested. Now I can fix it. No, you have to fix it right then. Right. So there are no hard and fast rules, but I would say getting sleep is the most important thing. If you're not getting 8 hours of sleep or close to it, like 7.5, then you're going to be performing very suboptimally. You're probably going to be making mistakes. You're probably, potentially going to be introducing bugs into the code base or, misconfiguring things like with servers and stuff and causing even more work for yourself down the road. So sleep is very important. I am a sleep advocate.
Cool. That's really great. Like, I have an interesting question from the participants. Like, yeah, they're asking like, why are your YouTube videos so lengthy when traditionally such videos are sliced up into a playlist?
A lot of people ask about that. There are several reasons. First, it's easier to share a single video and just say, okay, this is my video. I'll bookmark this and I'll just come back and watch 30 minutes a day. Like the way YouTube structures playlists and stuff, it's easier to get distracted. You're like, okay, where's the next video in the series? And also it works better within YouTube because people see like the course, they can immediately say like React in 4 hours or, Java Spring Boot in 12 hours or something like that. Like they see it and they're like, okay, it's going to take that much time. There's like, I can see the time stamp right there. Everything's on this video. If somebody leaves a comment that's important, it's on that same video, right? Like it makes sense to centralize all these things. I understand that a lot of people are like, oh, but I don't want to watch like an 11-hour video. You don't have to. Just watch like the first 30 minutes of it. And if you like it, keep watching it and come back later. Like none of these were designed to be watched in a single sitting.
Cool. Yeah, now that makes a lot of sense. Like, I guess the participants has got their answers. Like, yeah, next one. How would you define success in life?
If you feel like, I guess, like imagine yourself in a hospital bed and you're about to die, like looking back, like, do you feel regret? If you still feel a lot of regret, you're probably not as successful as you could have been, but hey, at least you're not feeling even more regret, right? Like the reality is, like, I think everybody feels regret for some things or another. If you don't feel regret, maybe you're like a psychopath. Because pretty much everybody does something that in their life that they're like, oh man, I really shouldn't have done that. That relationship could have been so much better. Or, that work that I turned in that day, I was unsatisfied, or I didn't do well enough on that exam. Or whatever it is, right? Like I didn't spend as much time with my grandparents as I should have, whatever it is, you're going to feel some regret. But I guess the question is, like, how much regret do you feel? Do you envision a life where you were dramatically different and you were dramatically more successful? And then you're like, well, that wasn't my life. My life was what I just lived. And it wasn't, that may be kind of like a sad way of thinking about it, but that's kind of how I think of it, because a lot of people value different things. Like some people just want to get really wealthy. And I understand, like if I grew up in a place and like my parents were poor, my grandparents were poor, and like if I had this long chain of poverty and then like suddenly I had material wealth and I was able to buy like a mansion for my kids and like I don't hold it against anybody that they value money. I think it's totally reasonable. I came from, like America is a pretty wealthy place in general. And, my father was a doctor and my grandfather was an engineer. Like we've always kind of had like a baseline middle-class existence. And so for me, it hasn't been a big deal for me. Like what's much more important for me is, do I feel like I'm helping people? And that's kind of been my metric of success. But there's this term coin of the realm. Everybody has a coin of the realm, right?
Yeah.
Like, and if you know what somebody else's coin of the realm is, like maybe this company's coin of the realm is they want to get a whole bunch of enterprise customers, right? And your coin of the realm is you want to create this really compelling conference. So hey, you sponsor my conference, and then we'll both get like our respective coins of the realm, right? So because everything's different for every people, some people just really love art, and nothing else matters, right? Or some people are just very romantic people, and their relationships are the most important thing in their lives, right? There's all kinds of different things. So whatever it is that for you personally that matters the most, don't let society dictate what success is. I've met plenty of people who nobody knows who they are. They're not wealthy, but they're very, very happy because they just like to read books all day, things like that. So I think it's dangerous if you let something outside of yourself dictate what your values are and what success is. So think about it for yourself. And yes, you should take into account your parents' wishes. I know that's very important. Like you don't want your parents to be disappointed in you in your entire life, because that will affect your own happiness, right? If your parents are disappointed. But if you can figure out a way to like keep your parents reasonably happy while also pursuing what you want to do, I think that's a really good compromise.
Yeah, that's a really good advice. Yeah. Yeah. Moving on to like the last couple of questions. Like, what do you think about the future of coding through AI? Like, recently there had been an issue on whether AI is needed or not, given the situation that AI may overpower the whole humanity, right? So, what's your thought on that?
Yeah. First of all, the GPT-3 demos and things like that are very impressive. They took a lot of money to produce. It's going to get cheaper. It's going to get more and more powerful. The main thing to keep in mind is that these are systems designed by engineers.
Yeah.
Software engineering, programming is the process of automating things. Whether you're automating how like a website handles, a specific request from a user through like a REST API, or whether you're automating like how a car handles a pedestrian walking in front of it. All these things, these are systems designed by humans. And yes, sometimes a system can design a system, right? And you can have robots programming robots, but for the most part, at least in modern day, most systems are designed by humans. And if you think about software engineering as the act of automating things, by definition, the last thing to be fully automated will be automating things. Yeah. So by definition, software engineering is the safest career you can possibly choose.
Cool. So, okay. And yeah, do you have an opinion that offline or traditional education would be or would become obsolete in the near future, at least for topics such as programming?
I don't think it'll become obsolete. I think that there will be like a coexistence. of in-person and online. I think online is great for people who live in remote places that wouldn't be able to, go to, I mean, like if you go to like an IIT or something like that, those are fantastic universities. And I would never want to like be the person who's supposed to reproduce like all the quality experiences and all the quality education you could get from an IIT online. That's probably an impossible task,
Yeah.
right? And like I spent a lot of time in California. Like I didn't go to a really nice school. I went to a cheap state school in the middle of the United States in a place that many of you probably haven't even heard of called Oklahoma. It's one of the
I
poorest
know
states in the
Oklahoma.
US.
I
Okay.
have got cousins over there.
Okay, great. Yeah. So it's not a spectacular place with spectacular education, but I did spend a lot of time at like Berkeley, for example, UC Berkeley. And I spent a lot of time at Stanford and talking to the students there and stuff and learning from them. And it's definitely, there's something to be said for just taking a lot of very motivated people who are really passionate about learning and putting them into a place together, whether that's a university campus, whether that's a hacker space or a maker space or just some sort of after school programming club. There are so many benefits to having people physically hanging out together, interacting with one another, and a lot of creativity springs from that. And believe me, if Free Code Camp had the resources, if we were just like, if I could snap my fingers and Free Code Camp had like Khan Academy's budget or something, we would absolutely have a real world office and people would go and physically like work together. Cause I think there's a lot of value in that. There's a reason why like, Apple and Google and Microsoft and all these organizations spend so much money on real estate and like housing and things like that is because they see a lot of merit in having people close together. And there's a reason why, so many countries are investing in building university systems because they see it as like a good path. Now, online education can definitely complement that. And I'm not saying that online education is just useful when you don't have the resources to have in-person education, because there are things like with convenience. Convenience is an underlooked, underappreciated factor in education. If you're a parent who's busy, who worked all day and they just have 15 minutes, they're not going to get in their car and drive over to a university campus and find parking and then walk over and find a classroom and sit down. Like that's just not practical. Night school, what we call night school in the US, like that's done. Like I don't think people are going to do that anymore. I don't think it's practical. But for sending people like to like a year or two or even 4 years of higher education, I still think there's tremendous use in that.
Cool. So coming on to the last question, like what is your strategy to learn new things? And can you give us some kind of advice, like how to tackle or how to approach a new problem or a new track you want to learn?
Yeah. So I learn a lot of new things. I spend a lot of time learning. Like right now, I'm of course like continuing to expand my Mandarin Chinese, and I'm learning Spanish, which is the second most commonly spoken language in the US. There are about 41 million people in the US who speak it.
Oh, really?
And it's spoken all throughout the Western hemisphere. Like outside of the United States, pretty much everybody's speaking Spanish except for, Portugal. They speak Portuguese, which is similar to Spanish. I think it's important to like learn new skills and continue to apply your brain and feel like a beginner at something, because it gives you empathy and humility. So what I do is if I want to learn something new, a good way to do it is just to go to like the subreddit for that thing and sort by all-time top. And then you could just see like what the most popular threads are on that war. And then that can give you an idea like very quickly, like, oh, okay, this is what this field is about. Like, let's say I wanted to learn a musical instrument, for example. I'm actually learning a musical instrument. So I'm playing the electric bass. During the lockdown, I was like, well, I've always wanted to learn, music and actually be able to play. So like, why not, get an electric bass and just play for 30 or 40 minutes a day. So I think the most important thing is finding a way that you can find a feedback mechanism. So I have some software. When I play the bass, I play the song. It tells me if I'm playing the notes wrong and stuff like that. And like, so I'll play a song, and if I get it wrong, it tells me all the different things I got wrong. So I've got evaluation criteria, right? If I were just playing by myself, oh, that sounds great. Who am I to judge if it sounds great, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't know anything. Same thing with programming. Like I could just, oh, cool, check out my website. It's fantastic. But if I don't have some sort of feedback mechanism, how do I know that my website is any good? And it's probably not good if I'm a beginner. Same thing
Yeah.
with drawing, right? Like I think in some cases people are like, oh, you shouldn't be, like every piece of art is good, or like every question is smart, But I do think that at the end of the day, we need to have some sort of criteria by which we judge things so that we can improve. If there's not that feedback component, then there's no growth. It's just, it's potentially growing in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Maybe you're ingraining bad habits that are going to, so that would be like one thing is like, if you set aside a specific goal, perhaps people who are watching this, if you have specific things you want to learn, you could just message and chat or something, or, I might be able to give you more concrete examples, but I definitely think the most important thing is practicing every day, and not saying I'm going to spend 6 hours today learning piano, but rather I'm going to do 30 minutes a day piano. Then I'm going to sleep. While I'm sleeping, my brain is like processing everything I've learned and processing the muscle memory associated with piano and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Or processing the muscle memory associated with making certain sounds with the mouth if you're learning a language. Maybe I'll dream in Spanish. That happens sometimes. That's always really great. That's when I know I've learned a lot. So, so just kind of take it easy and do it sustainably. Don't create this like big goal. Like I'm gonna play for the Boston Symphony by the end of 2022 or something like choose goals that are within your control. Like you
Yeah.
can say like I'm gonna study 30 minutes a day. That is a goal that I have full control over, right? Or I'm going to, I'm going to absorb this piece of content. Like one of the things I've been doing, and this is another random thing, is I've been learning like geography, and I've been using this site called Cetera where you can memorize geography. So like you can memorize, like I memorized like the location of all 193 United Nations
Oh
countries
my
on a
God.
map. So I can just like, oh, okay, like even the little islands and stuff that are technically like nations, according to the UN. I memorized their location just for completeness. But I also went and I memorized like all the states in India, all the states in Nigeria, all the provinces in China, like all the states in the US. There are like 50 of them. The US is actually pretty hard. So like I've been memorizing all these maps. And if you just try to memorize like one map a week and you just, each night you're like trying to memorize and of course it gives you feedback like, oh, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. And it tells you when you're right. So you got that feedback loop and you've got the slow deliberative process over a long period of time.
Yeah.
That's a long answer, but I think that's as somebody who's trying to learn as much as possible, I think that's good. And another thing is take notes. I've got like Sublime Text, which a lot of people are like, oh, you still use Sublime Text? Best text editor ever. Like if I were coding, I'd use VS Code, but for just random text, Sublime Text. I just have Sublime Text sheets where I type different things. Like if I see a word I haven't seen before, or I see some fact, then or some sort of equation or something, I'll just jot it down over there, and then I'll look at it like every day. I'll just go, okay, let's go through these, and then it just kind of refreshes my memory. A lot of the human brain seems to be like the human brain is very efficient. It'll just throw away things that it doesn't think you need anymore. So by constantly revisiting things and re-exposing yourself to things, you're telling your brain, hey, this is efficient, or this is important. Don't clean up this random like amino acids that are binded here because I might need that later, right?
Cool. Amazing. Yeah. Amazing. I think this was the best answer of this whole session. Anyways. So thank you so much, Quincy, for taking out your valuable time, like 60 minutes from your busy schedule to talk to us. It was really inspiring and it was really informative and interesting too. So I'll just hand over to Krishna again for winding up. So thank you so much from my side.
Thank you, Joyce.
Krishna, over to you.
It's Heba taking over right now. That was indeed an intriguing session. Participants, if you have any more questions, please feel free to type it in the chat box. Okay, so I hope you don't have any questions left. With that, we conclude the meeting. This was really a great experience for us to talk with someone like you, learn your story about how you entered this realm, and understand the circumstances we come face to face with while undertaking such a big responsibility. Listening to you today, a lot of participants here know how and where to start learning, and also that it's never too late to start. This definitely made us look up to and that's such an amazing and inspiring thing that you've done. Thank you so much for being here today, sir. I hope you have a peaceful night ahead.
Thank you again for
The
having me,
meeting is now
everybody.
over. Participants. Yep. The meeting is over. Participants can leave the meeting.
Thank you so much for that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure.
On a personal note, those weekly mails are doing a wonders. Thank you.
I'm glad they're worth your time.
Yeah.
All right. Well, everybody who joined, thank you again. If you ever have questions, if you can hear me, just send me an email, quincy@freecodecamp.org. Yeah, I hope you all have fun and stick with, programming, computer science, math, software engineering, these skills. I think these are the best things you can be learning right now. I really do think they're the most flexible. Joyce, I added you on LinkedIn. If you ever want to talk or if I can ever be of any help or anything, or if you write anything like about yourself, I'd be interested in learning more about you. So shoot me if you have some sort of autobiographical story of your journey, something like that. I'd be very interested in reading it. Same thing to you, Krishna. I think you all both been excellent hosts and excellent MCs, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you. Namaskaram. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.